My father slapped me at my sister's wedding when I refused to sign over my $2 penthouse, and the sound cut through the music like a blade. For a second, everything froze. The laughter, the clinking glasses, even the soft violin in the background seemed to choke mid-note. I tasted iron where my lips split, warm and metallic, while 100 eyes turned toward me, some shocked, some curious, most pretending not to stare. "Don't embarrass this family," he hissed, his fingers still curled from the strike, his voice low but sharp enough to pierce through the silence. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. The man who taught me how to tie my shoes now stood in front of me. Like a stranger, his smile rehearsed, his anger real. Beside him, my sister stood in her white dress, clutching her bouquet like a prop, her expression tight. Not surprised, not even concerned. Of course, this wasn't sudden. This was planned. A folder was pressed into my hands. Again, documents. I had already refused to sign twice that week. Transfer of ownership. My penthouse, my name erased, replaced neatly with hers. "Sign it," my father said, louder now, performing for the room. "Or walk out and don't come back." I glanced down at the paper, then back at him. Around us, whispers began to ripple. Relatives leaning closer, phones subtly raised, waiting for a scene. They thought this was my breaking point. What they didn't know was that I had already prepared for this moment. I slowly lifted my hand, not to sign, but to wipe the blood from my lip. My pulse steadied. My breathing evened out. The humiliation they expected from me never came. Instead, I gave a small, almost invisible nod. And that's when the doors at the back of the hall opened. I'm the quiet one in the family. The reliable son who never argued, never demanded, never made scenes. The one who stayed late to fix problems no one thanked me for. The one they assumed would always say yes. My father built his reputation on control, over business, over people, over us. Love, in his world, was transactional. You earned it by obeying. My sister learned that early. She mirrored him perfectly. Charming in public, calculating in private. I was the opposite. I believed effort spoke louder than manipulation. So I worked. While they hosted dinners and made connections, I built something real. Long nights, quiet risks, decisions no one saw. The penthouse wasn't a gift. It was proof. Mine. Every inch of it carried years they never noticed. But in this family, success wasn't yours unless it served them. The first time my father mentioned transferring assets, it sounded casual, strategic, temporary. By the second time, it was an expectation. By the third, it was pressure wrapped in disappointment. "You don't need that much space," my sister had said lightly, as if she were asking to borrow a dress. I remember realizing then, it was never a request. It was a decision they'd already made, just waiting for me to surrender to it. The first insult was so small it almost felt accidental. At a family dinner, weeks before the wedding, my father introduced me to one of his business associates as the son who got lucky with real estate. Not disciplined, not strategic, lucky. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just swirled his glass, like the words didn't matter. I smiled anyway. Later that night, I overheard my sister in the kitchen. Her voice lowered, but not enough. "He doesn't even use half that penthouse," she said, almost laughing. "It's wasted on him." A pause. Then my father's quiet reply, measured and certain. "That's why we'll fix it." I stood in the hallway, unseen, the words settling heavier than they should have. After that, it became a pattern, subtle, precise. Documents left on the dining table with my name already printed. Waiting. Conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. My mother avoiding eye contact, her silence louder than anything she could have said. Even at the wedding, it didn't stop. When I approached the stage earlier that evening, my sister leaned in just enough to smile for the cameras while whispering, "Don't make this difficult. For once, just do the right thing." The right thing. I nodded then too. Calm, composed, because by that point, I understood something they didn't. Every quiet dismissal had already made my decision for me. The slap should have been the breaking point, but it wasn't. The real shift had happened earlier, quietly, almost invisibly, on a Tuesday morning, when my father sent a revised version of the documents. This time, there was no pretense, no temporary transfer, no shared ownership, just a clean permanent handover. And a deadline, signed before the wedding. That was the moment something settled inside me. Not anger, not even hurt, just clarity. I printed the documents myself, all sat at my dining table, the one overlooking the city. I paid for and read every line slowly, not as a son, as someone who understood contracts, leverage, and intent. They weren't asking anymore. They were counting on me to fold, so I made a decision just as quiet as everything else I had done in my life. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't confront, and I definitely wouldn't refuse in a way they could control. I would let them believe I was still the same, predictable, compliant, easy to corner. And I would prepare. By the time I walked into the wedding hall, the outcome was already set. Not in their favor, and not by chance. So when my father told me to sign or leave, I finally understood the moment for what it was. Not a loss, a reveal. They thought they were taking something from me. They didn't realize. They had just stepped exactly where I needed them to. I didn't rush. That was the first rule I set for myself. No emotional decisions. No reactive moves. If they wanted control, I would respond with precision. I started with the documents. Not just the ones they gave me, but everything tied to the penthouse, purchase records, payment trails, registration details. Every signature, every clause. I built a timeline so clear it couldn't be questioned. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a property lawyer who had once told me, "Ownership isn't what people say. It's what you can prove." I sent him everything. Within a day he called back, calm, interested. "They're not just asking for a transfer," he said. "They're assuming you don't understand what you own." That was useful. We didn't escalate. We didn't warn them. Instead, we prepared quietly, reviewed inheritance structures, checked for any claims they could fabricate, and drafted responses that would hold up anywhere, not just at a family table. I also made one adjustment they would never notice. I stopped reacting. At dinners, I nodded. When my sister made comments, I let them pass. When my father pushed deadlines, I agreed. Without committing, predictability became my disguise. By the time the wedding day arrived, everything was already in place. Documents reviewed, position secured, timing aligned. All that was left was to let them make their move and walk straight into it. The hall was still holding its breath when the doors opened. Heads turned first, then bodies followed, curiosity pulling attention away from me and my father. The music didn't resume. It couldn't. Something had shifted. My grandmother walked in slowly, one hand resting on her cane, the other steady at her side. Behind her was a man in a dark suit, carrying a leather folder, the kind that doesn't belong at weddings. "Enough," she said, her voice quiet, but it carried. My father straightened, irritation flashing before he masked it. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she replied. The lawyer stepped forward, opening the folder with practiced calm. No raised voices, no accusations. Just documents, clean, precise, undeniable, ownership records, payment proofs, legal confirmations, and then the detail my father hadn't anticipated. "The property in question," the lawyer said evenly, "is fully protected under an independent holding. Structure established months ago. Any attempt to coerce transfer, especially under public pressure, can be formally challenged." Silence deepened. My sister's grip tightened around her bouquet. My father's confidence didn't shatter. It faded, piece by piece, as understanding replaced assumption. I hadn't argued. I hadn't refused. I had simply removed their ability to take anything at all. I met his eyes then, not with defiance, not with anger, just certainty. And for the first time that night, he had nothing to say. No one clapped. No one spoke. That was the first consequence. The absence of noise, where there should have been celebration. Conversations didn't resume. They dissolved into low murmurs. Guests turning to each other with quiet, disbelieving looks. Phones that had been raised for photos were now lowered, forgotten. My mother sat down slowly, as if her legs had given out beneath her. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my father either. My sister's smile, perfect just minutes ago, cracked at the edges. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough to reveal something underneath it she couldn't control. Embarrassment, maybe, or the realization that this moment, meant to center her, had shifted beyond her reach. My father said nothing, but silence from him was never neutral. It was calculation interrupted. Reputation matters in rooms like that. Control matters even more. And for the first time, both had slipped publicly, cleanly, without a scene he could dominate. As for me, I felt something unfamiliar. Not victory, not relief, distance, because the truth settled in quietly. This was never just about a penthouse. It was about how easily they believed I could be erased from something I built, and how confidently they expected me to accept it. That's why it mattered, not the property, the assumption behind it. I didn't stay for the rest of the wedding, not out of anger, just clarity. Outside, the night felt different, quieter, the kind of quiet that doesn't press on you, but opens space you didn't realize you needed. I stood there for a moment, adjusting my cuff as if I had simply stepped out for air, not walked away from something final, because that's what it was. Not a confrontation, a conclusion. I had spent years believing that patience would earn respect, that silence would be understood as strength. But silence in the wrong hands becomes permission, and I had given them plenty of it. Not anymore. In the weeks that followed, I kept things simple. Distance where there had been obligation, boundaries where there had been assumption. My father reached out once, brief, controlled as always. I didn't ignore it. I just didn't return to what I used to be. The penthouse remained mine, unchanged. But I saw it differently now. Not as proof for them, but as something I no longer needed to justify to anyone. And strangely, that was the real win. Because I didn't take anything from them. I just stopped letting them take from me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.